With only 2 days to go and Unchained released on Netflix, Tour de France fever is in full force and the 2025 edition is already chaos, gravel, injuries, stacked rosters, and I'll be rating how likely each one is to happen, and from surprise winners to DNFs. There's a few to unpack, and the final one is likely to raise a few eyebrows, I'm sure. So let's get into this and start off with number 7. So first up on our list, I'm going with Pogacar is going to take the yellow jersey on stage 2 and hold it all the way to Paris. It's almost unheard of in the modern age that anybody can hold the jersey the whole way through, but if anybody can do it, it's our man Pogacar. And whilst we know that stage 1 is definitely going to go to the sprinters, stage 2 is tailor-made for Pog with 2 short, sharp, steep climbs near the very end of nearly 1k at almost 10% each. This one's certainly going to boil down to the GC guys and the real punchers. And Pog's going to want to make a statement early on and trying to get that 100th stage win he mentioned at the Dauphiné. And after the Dauphiné, there's certainly no questions about his current form. And he also mentioned that his form's pretty much good all year round regardless. So there's no questions about him being a bit rusty at the start of this one. And whilst it is unlikely anybody does this in the modern era, let's not forget, Pog did take the pink jersey on stage 2 of last year's Giro and held it all the way. And if he finds himself with that yellow jersey at the end of stage 2, he may not want to give it back up without a fight. So for that reason, I actually think this one is a bit more likely than you might think. Therefore, I'm going to give this one an 8 out of 10 in the likelihood that it's going to happen. And that brings us to number 6 on our list. And for that, I'm going with Remco Evenepoel is going to lose time to both Vingegaard and Pogacar on both of the time trials for this Tour de France. You might already be aware that there's 2 time trials. There's a hilly time trial on stage 13 and a flat time trial on stage 5. Of course, Remco is the time trial world champion. We all know his pedigree, arguably the best time trial rider in the world. That being said, Stage 13's time trial is more of an uphill test of 8 kilometers at almost 8%, and that is huge amounts of climbing for a time trial guy especially. Definitely one that's more likely to suit the GC time trialers who can also climb like Vingegaard and Pog, so I certainly would say that they're the favourites over Remco to win that stage, which only really leaves him with stage 5, the flat time trial, and most people are expecting him to win that one and take big time on the other GC contenders. But we have to consider that he wasn't in top form at the Dauphiné or really this year at all. And we know that he went away to do quite a bit of work after the Dauphiné to try and get himself back up to the level of Vingegaard and Pog. So that leaves the question of, did he work on his climbing and maybe not focus quite as much on his time trialing? And it's also possible that he goes too deep trying to get as much time as he can on the other GC guys and ends up blowing up. Whilst it doesn't seem likely, it's certainly possible. So I really don't think this is as straightforward as everybody else thinks, and that Remco is definitely going to take a lot of time on the other guys. If he has a bad day, if he over-eggs it, if he's not in top form, he could end up losing time to those guys there. There's also the factor that a time trial in isolation is entirely different to a time trial in a 3-week Grand Tour. And in terms of likelihood, that means I'm going to give this one a 6.5 out of 10. And that brings us to next on the list, number 5. And for this one, I'm going with the Ineos Grenadiers implode with infighting and GC chaos. Whilst we know that Ineos have gone all in their own words, for GC leader Carlos Rodriguez in the 2025 Tour, he's certainly not been at top form recently, arguably taking a step or 2 back from his 2023 Tour de France peak. And although he's been anointed GC leader by the team, there's a certain Geraint Thomas that's on the squad that might have something to say about that in his last ever Tour de France before he retires at the end of the year. He's come out and said he's looking for a good performance, he would like a stage win, and he wants to roll back the years. Well, if he rolls the years back too far to say 2018, you might remember that year, Team Sky, as they were then known, went to the Tour de France with GC leader Chris Froome. But by the end of that tour, the man that walked away with the yellow jersey was none other than G. Thomas himself. So you have to ask the question, if Rodriguez has lost a bit of time due to positioning, a crash or bad legs, and G finds himself in position with the other GC guys, it's entirely possible that he thinks he's not going to work for Carlos Rodriguez and he's going to have his one last hurrah at the Tour. We can't forget that Thomas nearly won the 2023 Giro d'Italia and Rodriguez hasn't even been on the podium of a Grand Tour. So Thomas might resent working for the young upstart in his last ever Tour de France and think that as he's retiring, he's got nothing to lose but throw caution to the wind, the team orders out the window, and ride this one like the good old days. So therefore, I wouldn't rule this one out just yet, even if it isn't top of my list in terms of likelihood. And for that reason, I'm giving this one a 5 out of 10. And that takes me to number 4, possibly the most ambitious of all my picks on this list, but certainly one that I don't think is impossible. And that is Tadej Pogacar wins the yellow, the polka dot, and the green jersey at the 2025 Tour de France. It might sound crazy on paper, but the modern day cannibal is closer than you might think. By virtue of winning most of the later stages in the sort of third week, when a lot of the sprinters have already gone home and DNF'd, he sweeps up quite a lot of those green jersey points anyway. And of course, when going for the yellow jersey, he was super close to the polka dot jersey last year and only really gave it away to Carapaz on the final stage. He could have had it if he wanted it. So if Pog finds himself in a position in the third week where he's already in yellow by a comfortable margin, he might find himself thinking that he can take the green jersey if he's already got a good chunk of points like he did last year. Usually the green jersey competition is only dominated by 1 or 2 sprinters. And if this year that 1 or 2 sprinters ends up crashing out, going home, not finishing, or just not being dominant for any reason, I certainly wouldn't rule out Pog from taking a go at it. I don't think it's his primary objective, and I certainly don't think he's going to throw away yellow to try and get it. But if he finds himself in the spot, I think he won't be able to help himself but try and take that one too. The idea of taking all 3 jerseys in one Grand Tour is going to be irresistible to him if he finds himself even within touching distance of it. So for that reason, we've seen that he can win on any terrain. He can obviously win in the mountains, he can obviously win time trials, but we also know he can win flat, reduced bunch sprints. So there's literally no weaknesses in his arsenal for him being able to take down all 3 of these jerseys. It's just a case of the cards falling in the right spot, and we might see him take all 3 of these home at the end of this tour. For that reason, I think this one's more likely than you might expect, and therefore I'm giving it quite a high 7 out of 10. And that takes me to number 3 on the list. And to be fair, the one before it might be achieved by virtue of this one, because I've gone for this year, 2025, Tadej Pogacar is going to break the stage win record for a single Tour de France and take 9 stage wins home. Currently, the record is a 3-way tie, with the most recent on that list being Eddie Merckx. And they have 8 wins each, which seems an absolutely insane benchmark to try and achieve in one tour in the modern era. That being said, last year, Pog won 6 stages in the Tour de France in 1 year. And arguably this year, he's even stronger and another level above the competition. We know he likes making history and we know he likes being a record setter. And looking at the profiles of some of these stages in the first week and the third week, like I mentioned earlier, some of these Roulerie stages are built for him as well as the hilly ones. So you might find that in week 3, if Pog's even close, then the breakaway is not going to be allowed much of a leash at all, and Pog is going to be targeting every uphill stage finish. And if he does that, he's certainly going to be racking up a lot of points for all the jersey competitions. Last year, he actually, now I think about it, nearly won 7. There was that sprint with Vingegaard that he got pipped on the line. So is 2 more really that much more ridiculous? I don't think so. That being said, I think a lot of dominoes will have to fall in the right place for this one to work out. So I'm giving this one a much lower 4 out of 10. And that brings us to number 2 on our list. And of all the predictions on this list, this is the one I hope is least likely to happen. And that is that Jonas Vingegaard is going to crash out of the Tour de France whilst wearing the yellow jersey. I think we're all praying nothing like this happens to Jonas or any of the guys, but every year we do see crashes, and last year was no different. It would almost be a miracle if all of the GC guys got through this one unscathed and nobody ended ended up withdrawing due to sickness or injury. So unfortunately, it's just one of those things where it's likely to happen at some point during the race. And the reason that I've picked Vingegaard is that I think he's going to have to take a few more risks than he would usually take if he wants to get the beating of Pog. And that means they'll probably have to drill it if there's any splits in the peloton, if there's any gaps, if Pog's caught up behind for any reason. I expect them to try and make the most of any advantage they can get. And that might mean that they're pushing the pace a bit too much on the descents after splits in the crosswinds. We know Vingegaard has not had the best couple of years with crashes. Obviously, he had that horrific crash in Itzulia Basque Country last year that meant he wasn't at 100% for the Tour, and he did phenomenally to still be as competitive as he was for as long as he was. And of course, he was really unlucky at Paris-Nice this year and suffered a concussion. So fingers crossed that he isn't unlucky for this one as well. But I do think he's going to make an absolutely all-in attack to try and take the yellow jersey at some point in this race. And therefore, if he does crash out, it's entirely possible he'll be wearing the yellow jersey when he does. And for sure, this is the prediction that we're hoping doesn't come true. But unfortunately, crashes are a big part of racing, so... But let's hope nobody crashes out of this one and we get to see the top guys fighting it out all the way to Paris. And for that reason, in terms of likelihood, I'm going to give this one, thankfully, just a 3 out of 10. Okay, and that takes us on to number 1 at the top of our list, the most outrageous prediction that I've got for this Tour de France. I know this one's going to raise a few eyebrows, but let me explain why my pick for the number 1 most insane prediction for the 2025 Tour de France is that a Frenchman wins the yellow jersey. Whilst no Frenchman has won the Tour de France since Bernard Hinault in 1985, I'm sure you can all cast your memories back to 2019 when we watched Julian Alaphilippe steal our hearts in his quest to be the first man since Hinault to do it, and he fell agonisingly short in the third week, just a couple of stages from the end. But the emotion that was on display from him, from the fans, from the media was absolutely unbelievable. And since that moment, we've been desperately waiting for another French GC contender that might be able to fight it out for the win. But I know what you're thinking. You're saying, Jake, don't be so ridiculous. There are no French GC prospects that are at this Tour de France that have got a hope in hell of being able to compete with Pog, Vin and Remco. And on the face of it, you might be right. I'm not arguing with that. Certainly in a straight GC fight, there are no French candidates that are even in the same universe as those guys. That being said, there are 3 young French hopes that I've identified that might be able to carry the hopes of a nation and steal this year's yellow jersey from the big boys. And we also saw it nearly happen this year in the Tour de Suisse also, with my first pick, Arkea's 24-year-old French protege, Kevin Vauquelin. Now, as we know, he's been in fantastic form. He ended up getting second at the GC overall for the Tour de Suisse just a week or 2 ago. Our second possible French fan favourite is another stage winner from the Tour de Suisse, and undoubtedly a rider that's coming into this Tour de France, hunting for stage wins, and in top form is 22-year-old Groupama FDJ's Romain Grégoire. And third, finally, and probably the most likely of these prospects to have a chance at taking down the overall yellow jersey, he's certainly got the legs to be able to climb with the top guys on his day, is 21-year-old Bahrain victorious climber Lenny Martinez. And as we saw at the Dauphiné, he's in fantastic form. If given the opportunity from the break, he certainly has the climbing potential and the climbing legs to be able to win a stage and gain plenty of time. He could be a GC guy in the next few years. He's not quite there just yet. But that might be the advantage that he needs for the main guys to let him go up the road and not consider him a threat, underestimate him, and put him in a position where he could take home the Tour de France 2025 yellow jersey. I know that one's going to have raised some question marks for sure, and I grant you, I don't think it's super likely to happen, and for that reason, my outrageous number 1 pick, I'm giving, in terms of likelihood, a lowly 1.5 out of 10. There you go, guys. Were those predictions insane enough for you? Were they crazy enough for you? Which of those predictions do you think is the most likely to happen? Let me know down below. Do you think a French rider could actually win the Tour? What's your wildest prediction for this year's race? Make sure you let me know down below. Hope you enjoyed this one. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe for more Tour content, and catch you on the next one.